The hypnotic yellow lines on the dark highway had lulled me into a daze. I'd been driving for hours, fueled by little more than stale coffee and sheer determination to get home. Bleary-eyed, I nearly missed the dimly lit gas station that suddenly crept into view along the desolate stretch of road. The fuel gauge needle was dipping dangerously close to empty, so I eagerly pulled off the freeway in search of a refill. As my car crunched across the cracked pavement into the station, I surveyed the property with growing unease. The stucco walls were stained with dirt, and the windows so clouded with grime they were opaque. Rust devoured the edges of the ancient gas pumps like cancer. Aside from a sputtering neon open sign in the window, the whole place seemed abandoned. My nerves tingled, but the rumbling of my hungry tank reminded me I had no choice but to stop. Before I even cut the engine, the station door screeched open, and a man emerged. Dressed in stained coveralls with a grease-slicked ball cap pulled low over his eyes, he sauntered over wearing a vacant smile. Unease swirled in my gut, but I pushed it aside and stepped out to greet him. "Evening, Ma am," he said with a voice like gravel flashing yellowed teeth. "What can I do for you?" His thick drawl hinted at a southern upbringing. Doing my best to hide my reluctance, I asked for a full tank of gas. He eagerly took the pump from me, whistling softly as he inserted the nozzle. The off-key warbling set my nerves on edge. As the numbers on the gauge ticked higher, so did my desire to flee this place. But I still needed to pay, so I stood frozen in indecision. Making idle chit-chat about the weather, the man cleaned my windshield and checked the oil, despite my insistence it wasn't necessary. When he crouched down to inspect the tires, his movements seemed more sinister than helpful. Every glance into the shadows, searching for other signs of life, came up empty. It was just me and this stranger on the edge of nowhere. At last he announced the car was ready to go and followed me inside to the register. I dug for my wallet, fingers trembling slightly as I fished for my credit card. The sooner I paid and got out of here, the better. But as I lifted my eyes to hand over the card, my heart seized in my chest. The walls were plastered with weather-worn missing persons flyers, at least 20 of them. Men and women of all ages gazed out from the Xeroxed pages beneath desperate pleas for information about their disappearances. The dates and locations typed beneath the photos all had one chilling detail in common: this very gas station. For several nauseating heartbeats, I forgot how to breathe. The realization crashed over me that this seemingly helpful attendant had almost certainly played a part in these disappearances. Here I was, a young woman alone at night at his mercy. Bile scorched the back of my throat as I imagined becoming just another flyer pinned to this wall of horrors. Somehow I managed to steady my shaking hands enough to pass the man my credit card and scribble my signature. I could feel his eyes tracking my every movement. My mind spun with terrifying possibilities of how I could end up being the next one added to his gruesome collection. Mumbling a hasty thank you, I turned and forced myself not to run to the exit. My footsteps echoed sharply in the narrow hallway as I made my escape. Finally outside, I gulped the cool night air to soothe my parched throat. Fumbling with my keys, I scrambled into the car and locked the doors. But I didn't peel out of the parking lot like I yearned to, lest he grow suspicious. Forcing measured breaths, I drove away as calmly as possible. Only when the sickly glow of the station had faded in my rearview mirror did I finally exhale in shaky relief. Adrenaline still flooded my veins as I came to terms with how close I'd come to danger. In those flyer-adorned walls, a predator had lurked behind the facade of friendliness. By some miracle, I had escaped becoming his next victim. I drove until I reached an all-night diner glowing like a beacon along the highway. Surrounded by the comforting drone of conversation and sizzling pans in the kitchen, I slipped into a booth. Only then did I feel secure enough to process the full trauma of my encounter. Sipping a hot cup of coffee, I stared out the foggy window and shuddered. Now every pair of approaching headlights set my heart pounding with dread. I realized my naive trust in strangers had almost cost me my life tonight. From here on, I would be wary of everyone, especially after dark and off the beaten path. In the weeks and months after that harrowing night, I avoided remote gas stations at all costs. If I absolutely had to stop at one, it would only be somewhere bustling and well lit, with plenty of people around. Never again would I allow myself to become easy prey for predators lurking in the shadows. I still feel haunted remembering the sight of those flyers, knowing I could have just as easily become one of the missing. Even now, years later, the memory still makes my blood run cold. I share my story as a cautionary tale to others, reminding my own daughters to stay vigilant when traveling alone. Monsters often wear friendly faces, I warn them. Trust your instincts, not strangers. Don't become a flyer on the wall. Heed my words and keep your guard up. It could save your life. The needle on the gas gauge had been inching dangerously close to empty for the last 20 miles. My friends and I had been driving for hours through the vast emptiness of the desert, not passing any signs of life beyond the occasional passing car on the desolate highway. The rocky, arid landscape stretched for miles in all directions, broken up only by patches of dry scrub brush and the occasional cactus jutting up from the cracked earth. As the fuel light flickered on, a sense of unease washed over me. We were still hours from our destination, and I knew we didn't have enough gas to make it without stopping to refuel. But out here in the wastelands, gas stations were few and far between. We hadn't passed one for over an hour. The isolation preyed on my mind, making me feel small and vulnerable in the face of the great wide openness surrounding us. Just then, I spotted a small building set back from the road up ahead. As we drew nearer, I could see it was an old gas station, standing on its own in the middle of nowhere. The place looked like it had been built decades ago when routes like these were still major throughways. Now, it appeared faded and worn by time, forgotten by the modern world speeding by on the highway. I hesitated as we pulled up, taking in the peeling paint and rusting gas pumps. The windows were so caked with dust and grime that I couldn't see inside. Part of me wondered if we should just keep going, but the fuel gauge was dipping into the red zone and I knew we didn't have a choice. I needed to at least try to get gas here. The crunch of gravel under my feet sounded deafeningly loud as I stepped out of the car, the silence pressing in from all sides. The hot, dry air enveloped me instantly, seeming to sap the moisture from my skin. As I approached the nearest pump, I noticed the cord looked frayed and worn. I lightly tugged on the handle, letting out a sigh of relief when it clicked on. As the pump slowly filled our tank, I peered through the filthy window again, searching for any signs of life inside the abandoned building. All I could make out through the dirt and cobwebs was darkness. Just then, a bit of yellowed paper stuck to the next pump caught my eye. I reached over and carefully pried it free. It was a faded newspaper clipping, the headline bleakly proclaiming a brutal unsolved murder at a truck stop years ago. A cold sense of dread trickled down my spine. Suddenly, this place felt ominous, like a trap waiting to be sprung. The heavy silence weighed down on me, offset only by the quiet whir of the pump. As soon as the tank was full, I replaced the nozzle and hurried back to the car, now in a rush to get as far from this place as possible. But some morbid curiosity gnawed at me, drawing my gaze back to the abandoned station. I couldn't explain the desire, but I needed to see inside. Before I could talk myself out of it, I was approaching the front door. The rusted hinges groaned loudly in protest as I pushed it open, echoing through the cavernous interior within. The spacious inside looked just as dilapidated as the exterior. Dust coated every surface in a thick blanket, and tangles of mildew hung from the water-stained ceiling. The shelves stood empty and bare, any wares long since scavenged or pillaged. Each footstep I took crackled and creaked, shattering the heavy silence that filled the dead space. In the shadows, I could just make out strange symbols carved deeply into the walls, their meanings indecipherable. A loud bang suddenly split the air, making my heart violently lurch. I whirled around to see a window swinging open in the breeze, the glass long since shattered and gone. Letting out a shaky breath, I could feel my nerves were completely frayed. I needed to get out of there. The irrational thought crossed my mind that just being there was somehow putting my life in danger. As I turned to leave, a metallic glint caught my eye near the counter, partially obscured by debris. I bent down to find a vintage silver lighter, likely dropped and forgotten decades ago by some traveler passing through. Without considering why, I grabbed it and stuffed it into my pocket. Some primal part of me thought it seemed like it belonged there now, a souvenir from this peculiar place. The overwhelming urge to flee rushed over me as I hurried out into the blistering sunlight. As we pulled away, I watched in the side mirror as the ramshackle station faded into the distance behind us. While glad to leave the place behind, I couldn't shake the strange feeling that some part of it had followed me. Over the next few days, a tense atmosphere seemed to hang over me. I became plagued by bizarre visions whenever I closed my eyes to sleep, cryptic symbols, swirling shadows, shapes that lurked at the edge of my vision. I would snap awake, heart racing, consumed by the sense that something sinister was out there, just waiting for the right moment to step forward from the darkness. When I pulled the old lighter from my pocket, I felt a deep sense of dread grip me. The unease started after we left the gas station. Did I bring something back with me from that place? Some form of lurking evil that now had its hooks in me, My friends dismissed my concerns, chalking it up to an overactive imagination. But to me, the danger felt unnervingly real. I tossed the lighter away at the next stop, desperate to regain peace of mind. But even with the object gone, the visions persisted. Distorted faces leapt out from shadows, and unseen eyes tracked my every move. I couldn't remember the last time I had slept through the night. Exhaustion weighed down my limbs, but closing my eyes brought only terrors now. My friends grew worried, telling me I needed to see a doctor, that I was clearly paranoid from lack of rest. But I knew modern medicine could do nothing for me now. This was something more sinister, some dark force invoked by that abandoned place, still keeping me trapped in its malevolent grip even now. Whatever evil presence dwells there seems to have reached out and claimed me. I don't understand how or why, but I cannot deny the dark hold it has over me. I fear sleep now, knowing it brings me closer to the sinister visions that feel more real with each passing day. As hard as I try, I cannot escape the malevolent tendrils of this thing that has marked me. I can only pray I find a way to break its grasp before I lose my own grip on reality completely. The visions beckon, and I don't know how much longer I can resist. It was just another long day on the endless interstate. I had been behind the wheel for hours, focused on the open road ahead. My eyes strained as the sun began to set over the expansive fields surrounding the highway. I still had a few more hours to go before reaching my family's home across the state. Glancing at my gas gauge, I realized I needed to stop soon to fill up and grab a quick snack to recharge. Up ahead, I spotted a small, run-down gas station just off the upcoming exit. As I pulled into the parking lot, the place looked deserted except for an old, beat-up pickup truck parked by the pumps. The lot was dimly lit by a few scattered-over headlights flickering ominously. Cautiously, I scanned the area before opening my door. Seeing no one around except a stray cat rummaging through an overflowing dumpster, I slowly stepped out of my car. The air was heavy and humid, amplifying the eerie silence surrounding the remote station. My senses heightened as I started pumping gas into my car, keeping alert for any sign of life. Just as I replaced the gas nozzle, a man suddenly came bursting from the side of the building, frenzied and out of breath. His clothes were disheveled and he had a wild, unstable look in his eyes that put me instantly on edge. "Please, you have to help, my wife is in labor," he exclaimed, panic seeping into his voice. He frantically explained that their car had broken down up the road, and now his wife was stranded there alone, unable to make it to the hospital to deliver their baby. My maternal instincts kicked in as I felt deep concern for what sounded like a woman in a crisis. But something about the man's erratic energy seemed off. My inner alarm system started buzzing quietly. I cautiously told the man I would follow him to check on his wife and offered to call an ambulance right away. This suggestion seemed to upset him further. No, just come now, there's no time for that," he urged forcefully. I took a small step back, a cold trickle of dread running down my spine. Why wouldn't he want emergency medical assistance if his wife was truly about to give birth? Each second that passed amplified the blaring warning signals in my mind, screaming at me not to go with this stranger. As I hesitated, the man suddenly grabbed my arm in a painful, vice-like grip. "We have to go right now," he bellowed, spittle flying from his mouth. Fear erupted through every cell in my body as I wrenched my arm from his grasp and scrambled to get away. The man's face contorted in anger, realizing I was not going with him. My heart pounded frantically against my ribs like a caged bird as I darted for my car. With trembling hands, I somehow managed to get my driver's side door open and threw myself inside, hitting the lock just as the man grabbed the handle. He pounded violently on the window, his eyes wild and full of rage, screaming at me to open up. I fumbled to get my keys into the ignition as he yanked furiously on the door. The engine roared to life and I slammed on the gas pedal, peeling out of the parking lot at top speed. I watched with terror as the man's angry figure shrank smaller and smaller in my rearview mirror until the darkness engulfed him completely. My whole body shook uncontrollably as the magnitude of the encounter washed over me. I realized how close I had come to being abducted, or even killed, by that dangerous stranger. Once I reached the next town, I drove straight to the police station on autopilot, still dazed from the traumatic experience. The officers listened with concern as I recounted every detail, telling me this was likely part of a known scam to lure and capture vulnerable women traveling alone. I was horrified to learn predators were out there exploiting expectant mothers as bait for their evil schemes. After giving the police a description of the old pickup and the frenzied man, I numbly continued driving to my family's house. My mind kept replaying those chilling moments like a broken record. One small decision, getting in that truck, could have led to my life being destroyed or ended. I kept envisioning that man's contorted face screaming at me through the glass and shuddering. By some miracle, my gut instinct had warned me of the hidden evil lurking beneath the surface, saving me from becoming another tragic victim. From that day on, I resolved to be more cautious and vigilant when dealing with strangers on the road, no matter how desperate their pleas for help seem. But my heart aches for the women who have fallen prey to these scams and paid the ultimate price. The world holds such darkness if you let your guard down. I am now thankful for every day that I get to see my loved ones, having narrowly escaped becoming a grim statistic myself. For all the good left, there is still such evil. I will never take a stranger at face value again after staring into the eyes of a monster. This chilling brush with danger was the wake-up call I desperately needed. Now I aim to spread awareness so other women traveling alone can stay safe. I stopped at the next gas station to warn the young female clerk about the labor scam, hoping she will be vigilant and help inform more people. The authorities also need more resources to shut down these rings of deception that exploit innocent lives. Until then, we all must stay vigilant, trust our instincts, and look out for each other. My intuition saved me that night. Now I hope my experience can help save someone else.